Listen carefully, because this message is not waiting for tomorrow, it is not waiting for a better moment, and it is not waiting for you to feel ready. This message has already arrived, and the reason your heart feels stirred right now is because God has been knocking long before this moment. There are words that can be delayed, and there are words that must be released immediately. And this is one of those moments where delay becomes disobedience. Some messages are gentle reminders, but this one is a divine interruption. God is not whispering today. God is calling, and the call carries urgency because time has been moving faster than your preparation. What you thought could wait has been weighing heavily in the unseen, and heaven is saying it cannot wait any longer. There are seasons when God allows patience to mature us, and there are seasons when patience becomes a disguise for fear. Many people call it waiting, but God calls it hesitation. Many call it timing, but God calls it avoidance. You have delayed steps that were meant to be taken, conversations that were meant to be spoken, decisions that were meant to be made with courage. You told yourself you would respond when things were clearer, when resources increased, when confidence felt stronger. But clarity does not come before obedience. Clarity follows obedience. God does not reveal the full path to those who refuse the first step. The delay you justified has quietly grown into a wall between you and the next move of God. God is not slow. God is deliberate. When God speaks with urgency, it is because something is already in motion. What you do not see is that opportunities have been aligned, protection has been arranged, and provision has already been assigned to your obedience. But heaven does not fund hesitation. Heaven responds to movement. The moment you step forward, what has been waiting in the unseen begins to move toward you. Yet as long as you stand still, everything remains suspended. This is why the message cannot wait any longer. Delay is not neutral. Delay is a decision, and every decision carries consequences. There are people who believe God will eventually work around their reluctance. They assume that if they wait long enough, God will choose someone else, adjust the plan, and move forward without them. But what they fail to understand is that while God's purpose will never fail, their personal participation is not guaranteed. God does not beg anyone to obey. God invites, warns, confirms, and then allows the weight of choice to rest fully on the human heart. If you walk away, God will still move, but you will watch from a distance what you were meant to live from within. This message is not meant to frighten you, but it is meant to wake you. There is a difference. Fear paralyzes, but awakening mobilizes. God is awakening you because comfort has made you forgetful. You have grown used to surviving instead of advancing. You have learned how to cope instead of how to conquer. You have settled into routines that keep you busy but unfulfilled. And while you were managing your days, God was calling you higher. Not louder, not busier, but deeper. Deeper obedience, deeper trust, deeper surrender. God has been patient, but patience does not mean permission. Mercy does not erase responsibility. Grace does not cancel assignment. There are things God has placed in your hands that you have not treated as sacred. You postponed them, minimized them, and sometimes even doubted that they were from God at all. Yet the persistence of the call is proof of its origin. God does not repeat himself because he is unsure. God repeats himself because you have not responded. Look at how many times your heart has been stirred in the quiet moments. Look at how many times conviction has risen when you try to distract yourself. That discomfort is not confusion. It is alignment, trying to pull you back into position. God does not shout through chaos alone. Sometimes God speaks through restlessness. When peace disappears, it is often because you are walking away from what you were designed to do. Peace is not the absence of challenge. It is the presence of obedience. You have been asking God for direction while ignoring instruction. You have been asking God for confirmation while resisting commitment. You want assurance without surrender, but God does not work that way. Faith is not a negotiation. It is a response. When God speaks, heaven waits to see whether you will trust or retreat. And right now, heaven is watching closely because the moment requires movement. This message cannot wait because what is ahead requires preparation that begins now. You cannot step into tomorrow's responsibility with yesterday's mindset. God is calling you to leave familiar patterns that once protected you but now limit you. There was a time when those habits kept you stable, but now they keep you small. God is not offended by your weakness, but God will not accommodate your refusal to grow. Growth is uncomfortable because it demands change, and change exposes where you have been hiding. You may feel unqualified, but qualification has never been the requirement. Availability is. God does not search for the most polished. God responds to the most yielded. Every time you say yes with sincerity, God supplies what you lack. But when you say no in silence, you cut yourself off from what was already prepared. This is why delay is dangerous. It feels harmless, but it slowly closes doors you did not realize were time sensitive. God is calling you to act while the door is still open. Not every opportunity remains forever. Not every assignment can be postponed without loss. There are moments when heaven aligns people, timing, and circumstances in a precise window. And if you hesitate too long, that window closes. Not because God is cruel, but because purpose moves forward. What was meant to lift you can pass you by if you refuse to rise. You have been praying for change, but prayer without obedience becomes noise. God hears every word, but God responds to movement. When you act on what you already know, God reveals what you do not. This is the divine order. Obedience unlocks understanding. Waiting for perfect confidence is a trap. Confidence grows after obedience, not before it. This message cannot wait, because the longer you delay, the louder fear becomes. Fear grows in stillness. Doubt strengthens in isolation. But when you move, fear loses its grip. Action silences excuses. Movement exposes the lie that you are incapable. The truth is, you are not incapable. You are hesitant. And hesitation is costing you more than you realize. God is not calling you to reckless action. God is calling you to faithful obedience. There is a difference. Obedience is rooted in trust, not impulse. It is anchored in conviction, not emotion. God has already shown you enough to take the next step. The problem is not lack of information. It is lack of resolve. And resolve is formed when you decide that obedience matters more than comfort. You were not created to live in perpetual preparation. Preparation has a purpose, but it must lead to execution. There comes a moment when training ends and action begins. That moment is now. This message is the line between delay and destiny. You cannot stand on it forever. You must cross it. God is not waiting for you to be fearless. God is waiting for you to be faithful. Faith does not deny fear. It moves despite it. Faith does not require certainty. It requires trust. And trust is proven through action. Every step you take in obedience reshapes your future. Every step you refuse reshapes it as well. The urgency you feel is not pressure. It is alignment. Pressure comes from fear of failure. Alignment comes from recognition of purpose. God is aligning you because what comes next demands focus, courage, and commitment. You cannot drift into purpose. You must step into it deliberately. There are people connected to your obedience who do not even know your name yet. There are outcomes tied to your decision that extend beyond your understanding. When you delay, it is not only your life that is affected. God works through connection, influence, and ripple effects. Your obedience unlocks movement in places you cannot see. This is why the message cannot wait any longer. The time for consideration has passed. The time for response has arrived. God is not asking for perfection. God is asking for willingness. And willingness expressed through action becomes power in the hands of God. Your heart knows this is true, that inner stirring is not imagination. It is recognition. Something within you knows this moment matters. Do not silence that awareness. Do not delay again. What God has placed before you is not a suggestion. It is an invitation into alignment, growth, and purpose that demands a response now. The weight you feel pressing on your spirit is not condemnation. It is responsibility awakening. God does not burden people to crush them, but God do. Place weight on those who are meant to carry something meaningful. Light assignments do not produce heavy conviction. If this message stirs you deeply, it is because God has entrusted you with more than you have been willing to acknowledge. You were never meant to live lightly about serious matters. You were meant to move with intention, with awareness, with a sense that every step carries eternal significance. God sees beyond your excuses, beyond your self-doubt, beyond the stories you tell yourself to stay comfortable. God sees the version of you that obedience would reveal. You see limitations. God sees capacity. You see risk. God sees refinement. You see loss. God sees release. Every hesitation you call wisdom is often fear wearing a respectable mask. God is patient with your growth, but God is not impressed by delay disguised as prudence. There is a time when careful consideration honors God, and there is a time when it dishonors Him. That time is when consideration becomes avoidance. You were not given insight so you could admire it. Insight was given so you could act on it. Revelation demands response. When God reveals truth, neutrality is no longer an option. Silence becomes a choice. Stillness becomes resistance. You cannot unsee what has been shown to you, and you cannot unknow what has been placed within you. Responsibility increases with awareness, and awareness has already been awakened. God is calling you to stop waiting for permission from people who cannot see what you see. Approval is not a prerequisite for obedience. Many assignments from God are misunderstood at first, not because they are wrong, but because they are ahead of their time. If you wait for everyone to agree, you will always arrive late. God does not consult crowds before giving direction. God speaks to hearts, not committees. There will always be voices telling you to slow down, to be cautious, to not disrupt what already works. But what works for survival is not always what works for purpose. God is not calling you to preserve comfort. God is calling you to advance truth. Advancement always disturbs something. It disturbs fear. It disturbs stagnation. It disturbs systems built on complacency. That disturbance is not destruction. It is correction. Do not confuse resistance with rejection. Resistance often confirms that movement has begun. When nothing pushes back, it often means nothing is moving forward. God allows resistance to strengthen resolve. Pressure reveals commitment. When you encounter opposition, do not retreat automatically. Ask yourself whether the resistance is a sign that you are finally stepping out of passivity. God refines courage through challenge. You have underestimated how much God can do through one obedient decision. You measure impact by visible results, but God measures impact by alignment. One step taken in obedience can redirect the course of years. One act of courage can dismantle cycles that have lasted generations. One moment of surrender can unlock doors that effort alone could never open. God does not need your strength. God needs your yes. There are times when God allows delay to expose what truly holds your loyalty. If obedience only happens when it is convenient, then convenience is your authority. But when obedience happens despite discomfort, God is honored as the highest authority. Your response in moments of urgency reveals what you truly value. This message cannot wait because it is testing priority. It is revealing whether God's voice holds more weight than fear, more weight than comfort, more weight than public opinion. You are not behind because you lack ability. You are behind because you have been negotiating with conviction. You have treated calling as optional and obedience as flexible. But there are moments when flexibility becomes disobedience. God is not asking you to understand everything. God is asking you to trust enough to move. Trust is proven through action, not intention. God knows your heart, but God also watches your steps. Desire without movement does not fulfill purpose. Intention without follow-through does not produce transformation. You can believe deeply and still remain stagnant if belief never turns into obedience. Faith that stays internal never becomes visible. And faith that never becomes visible never becomes influential. There is a narrowing happening in your life. Things that once distracted you no longer satisfy you. Conversations that once entertained you now feel empty. This is not loss. This is focus forming. God removes noise to amplify direction. When distractions fall away, purpose becomes clearer, but clarity demands response. God will not keep revealing while you remain unwilling to act on what has already been shown. You have asked God to use you, but usage requires availability. Availability requires surrender. Surrender requires trust. Trust requires movement. God is not interested in borrowed faith or second-hand conviction. God is calling for ownership. Ownership of responsibility. Ownership of calling. Ownership of obedience. When you stop shifting responsibility to circumstances, to timing, to people, you step into authority. Authority does not come from position. It comes from obedience. When you obey God, you move with a weight that cannot be manufactured. Words spoken from obedience carry power. Actions taken from obedience carry influence. Lives aligned with obedience carry peace even in difficulty. That peace is not the absence of struggle. It is the presence of purpose. Do not wait for conditions to improve before you move. Conditions rarely improve before obedience. They improve because of it. God often changes circumstances after you step, not before. If everything were safe and predictable, trust would not be required. God calls you forward not because the path is easy, but because the destination is necessary. There is a seriousness to this moment that should not be ignored. Not heaviness, but gravity. Some moments shape direction permanently. You may not recognize them immediately, but later you look back and realize everything changed when you decided to move. This is one of those moments. This message cannot wait because the cost of inaction is quietly increasing. Every day you delay, uncertainty grows louder. Every day you delay, courage weakens. But every day you obey, clarity sharpens. Momentum builds quickly once movement begins. What feels overwhelming now will feel manageable once you take the first step. God never asks for the whole journey at once. God asks for the next step in trust. You are closer than you think. The distance between where you are and where God is calling you is not measured in years or resources, but in obedience. One decision can collapse that distance instantly. The power is not in preparation anymore. It is in response. Preparation has already done its work. Now action must take its place. God is not calling you out to abandon you. God is calling you forward to meet you. When you step into obedience, you do not walk alone. Provision follows obedience. Strength follows obedience. Wisdom follows obedience. But they follow. They do not precede. This is the order God has established, and it does not change to accommodate fear. The stirring in your heart is not emotional manipulation. It is spiritual alignment. Something within you recognizes that this is true. That recognition is the soul responding to truth. Do not suppress it. Do not talk yourself out of it. Do not delay again. The longer you stand at the edge, the harder it becomes to jump. But the moment you move, the fear loses its voice. God is ready. Heaven is ready. What has been waiting is not information, resources, or timing. What has been waiting is your response. God is not asking you to manufacture courage. God is asking you to trust the courage that obedience produces. Many people wait to feel brave before they act, but bravery is born in movement, not in meditation. The heart strengthens as the feet move. When you remain still, fear rehearses its arguments. When you move, fear loses its audience. God did not design courage to precede obedience. Courage follows obedience like a shadow follows a body in motion. There is a holy restlessness stirring because God is shifting you from intention to execution. Intention feels spiritual because it sounds good, but execution is what changes reality. God honors sincerity, but God responds to obedience. You can speak about purpose endlessly and still live unchanged if words never become action. At some point, discussion must give way to decision. Reflection must give way to resolve. This is that point. God has allowed you to feel the discomfort of delay so you would recognize the danger of remaining where you are. Comfort can become captivity when it keeps you from obedience. You may not be suffering outwardly, but inwardly you know something is missing. That absence is not failure. It is calling unfulfilled. God does not let hunger exist without provision. The hunger itself is evidence that something was prepared to satisfy it. Do not assume that because you have waited a long time, waiting longer will somehow improve the outcome. Some doors do not close loudly. They close quietly. They close while you are still thinking, still weighing options, still asking questions that obedience would have already answered. God speaks clearly enough for movement, not always clearly enough for comfort. If you wait for total certainty, you will miss divine timing. You are not meant to carry this weight alone, but you are meant to carry it personally. Responsibility cannot be delegated when God assigns it directly to you. Others may support you, guide you, even walk alongside you, but the decision itself cannot be outsourced. God speaks to individuals because transformation begins at the personal level before it spreads outward. Collective change always starts with individual obedience. There is a discipline required in responding quickly to God. It is not impulsive. It is practiced sensitivity. The more you delay, the harder it becomes to hear clearly. Delay dulls perception. Obedience sharpens it. Every time you respond promptly, your discernment grows stronger. Every time you hesitate, the voice becomes easier to ignore. This is why immediate response matters more than perfect execution. God is not keeping score of your past mistakes. God is watching your present response. Regret has no power to rewrite purpose, but obedience can redeem lost time. God compresses seasons when hearts align fully. What you think will take years can be accelerated when surrender is complete. But acceleration only happens when resistance ends. You may be worried about what obedience will cost you, but you have not fully considered what disobedience is already costing you. Peace has been compromised. Focus has been scattered. Energy has been drained by internal conflict. Obedience simplifies life. It may not make it easier, but it makes it clearer. Clarity brings strength. Strength brings endurance. God is not impressed by how long you have believed. God is moved by how deeply you trust. Trust is not proven by agreement. It is proven by obedience. Agreement stays internal. Obedience becomes visible. God's work in the world moves through visible obedience. This is how unseen purpose becomes tangible impact. You are not too late, but you are being warned not to wait longer. Mercy has held the door open, but mercy also speaks truth. Truth says the season is shifting. Truth says the moment is narrowing. Truth says the call has reached its final repetition. God is not raising the volume anymore. God is waiting for movement. Do not look for a sign beyond this stirring. Do not wait for circumstances to force you forward. Forced movement is painful. Chosen obedience is powerful. When you choose obedience, you move with dignity, not desperation. You move with purpose, not panic. God honors willing hearts, not pressured ones. There is a refining happening even now. Old attachments are loosening. Old fears are being exposed. God is preparing you internally for what obedience will demand externally. This preparation is not meant to keep you waiting. It is meant to make you ready to move. Readiness without response becomes frustration. Readiness with response becomes fulfillment. You do not need to announce your obedience before you live it. You do not need validation before you move. Quiet obedience often carries the greatest authority. God sees what is done in sincerity, not what is displayed for approval. When you move in humility, God amplifies the impact beyond what you could have planned. The urgency you feel is love in action. God loves you enough not to let you remain stalled. God loves you enough to disrupt your comfort. God loves you enough to confront your hesitation. This is not rejection. This is pursuit. God is not pushing you away from safety. God is pulling you toward purpose. Let go of the need to control outcomes. Obedience is your responsibility. Results are not. God never asked you to manage consequences, only to follow instruction. When you try to control what comes next, fear takes over. When you focus on obedience, peace returns. Peace does not mean certainty. It means alignment. You are being invited into a narrower path, not because options are limited, but because focus is required. Wide paths allow distraction. Narrow paths demand attention. Attention keeps you sensitive. Sensitivity keeps you aligned. Alignment keeps you effective. God is refining your direction, so your impact will be precise, not scattered. This message cannot wait, because the version of you that emerges through obedience is needed now, not later. What you carry is not for a distant future. It is for this moment. God does not awaken purpose prematurely. When purpose awakens, it is because the time has arrived. You do not need to become someone else to obey. You do not need to fix everything before you move. You move as you are, and obedience shapes who you become. God works with real people, not perfected versions. Authentic surrender matters more than flawless performance. What remains now is choice, not emotion, not discussion. Choice. And choice does not require feeling ready. It requires deciding to trust God more than fear, more than comfort, more than delay. And as that decision forms within you, the path ahead begins to open. Strength begins to rise. And the next step draws closer, waiting not for perfection, but for movement. Now is the moment to be honest with your own soul. Not tomorrow, not after another delay, not when circumstances feel safer. Stand still within yourself and ask whether the life you are living reflects the voice you have heard. God does not speak to entertain hearts. God speaks to transform them. What you have heard demands a response, not applause. It asks for surrender, not agreement. Let this moment become the turning point where excuses lose their authority and obedience takes its rightful place. Examine the spaces where fear has been disguised as wisdom and comfort has been mistaken for peace. God does not call you to remain unchanged. God calls you to be aligned. Alignment will stretch you, but it will also steady you. When your life is aligned with God, you may face storms, but you will no longer drift. You will move with direction, with confidence, rooted not in certainty, but in trust. Do not measure yourself by what others expect from you. Measure yourself by what God has already placed within you. That inner stirring is not random. It is purpose pressing forward. Honor it, protect it, act on it. Every step taken toward God reshapes the heart, sharpens the spirit, and strengthens the will. You were not created to live divided between calling and fear. You were created to walk whole, focused, and faithful. Let this be the hour when you stop postponing obedience and start embodying it. Lay down the weight of hesitation. Release the need to control outcomes. Choose trust over delay. Choose obedience over comfort. Choose alignment over approval. When you move toward God, you do not move into emptiness. You move into purpose, into clarity, into strength that rises as you walk. Carry this truth with you. God does not abandon those who step forward in faith. God meets them. God strengthens them. God walks with them. Let your life answer the call you have heard. Let your actions speak louder than your intentions. Let your obedience become the evidence that you trust God completely. And let that trust shape every step you take from this moment onward.